Hi everyone. So today I'm here to talk about the pathology report. At this point, you know that I discovered the mass. I have had the ultrasound done and I've had the mammogram and biopsy done. And so within, about 24 hours or a little more, I also had the results of that biopsy. And honestly, that day, as you can imagine, was a very heavy day, just kind of waiting, because I left out on that Thursday, the day that I had the biopsy done, knowing that I would get a call from the nurse with the results. And so when the call came, it was, more so like you're ready for the call, but then you're not ready for it, because you're ready because if everything is fine and negative, then you want to hear those results as soon as possible. But in the event that it's, not good news, then you're dreading that phone call. And so I definitely found myself dreading that phone call that day. And so the call, it went much like this. And so, the nurse, I answered the phone, and so she's like, hi, is this, Zacobia Ritter? And I'm like, yes, this is she. And so she's like, she did ask for like some demographic information, date of birth, that kind of thing, to authenticate the call, to verify that it was me that she was speaking with. And then she asked if it was okay to share the results with me at that time, was now a good time. And so I, told her that it was. And so she went on to proceed to explain or reiterate what happened with the biopsy. And so she was like, you understand that there were 3 samples taken from the biopsy yesterday, lymph node tissue and 2 breast tissue samples. And I said, yes. And so she said, well, I have the results. And so we'll start with the lymph nodes. Your lymph nodes results came back negative. There was no cancer cells found in your lymph node that was sampled at that time. And so I had my, sigh of relief. That was, definitely good news to hear. And so I was kind of anticipating that everything else would kind of follow the path of those results. However, she went into saying that, she led with a however as well. So lymph nodes was negative. However, the 2 breast tissue samples did come back positive as a carcinoma, which means cancer. And so, in those moments, hearing those words is like a kick to your gut. Like, oh my goodness, like, are you kidding me? And so I just remember trying to be as strong as possible on the call. I remember my husband was on the call at a time, like on a separate call, and I don't even remember who he was talking to or what it was about. But I remember in that moment, it was like, holy cow, like, what is being said? What do I do? And so I naturally was like, just kind of telling myself not to panic. It's going to be okay. Just kind of what I'm saying in my head. And so, she kind of expressed her, sincere apologies for those results. And, I'm sorry that these are the results, and, but this is what, is kind of going to happen from here. And so she explained, she meaning the nurse, explained that the next steps would be that the radiologist and a team of doctors would basically get together and discuss the next steps, review everything that has been gathered so far, all the results, and determine the best treatment plan for me. I don't think I mentioned this when I talked about the mammogram and biopsy in the previous video, but the moment, if you go back and watch that video, there's a moment where I share, where I ask my radiologist, Dr. Shaw, to be real with me based off of what she was seeing. And so in the moment of her saying, if it was, and I kind of come to the realization that it could be, definitely possible that I have breast cancer, there was a moment where she kind of went in and explained that if it was, indeed cancer, what those next steps would be. And what she explained was that she and a team of doctors, the oncologists, the radiologists, or not, sorry, she's the radiologist, the oncologist, and then the radiation oncologist, as well as a breast surgeon. The four of them would get together to discuss my results, my case, and essentially come up with what would be, the best treatment plan for me before I even met with them. And so when the nurse mentioned it wasn't like foreign language hearing her say that, because I had already heard it the day before, that's what would have been the next steps if my results came back, that it was indeed cancer. And so, she went through those next steps with me and gave me a date of when that appointment would take place. And so the MDC visit, which was the multidisciplinary clinic visit, was scheduled for March 21st. At that time, I didn't know exactly who the doctors were that I'd be seeing, but I knew that I would be seeing a oncologist, a radiation oncologist, and a breast surgeon. She also stated that they would want to have a bilateral breast MRI done prior to that appointment with the MDC clinic, with the team of doctors. And so that was scheduled for March 18th, which would allow them enough time to get the results and review it before I met with them on the 21st. And so she, the nurse kind of went through everything as slowly as possible. Of course, in that moment, everything was just kind of like, womp, 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 womp. And she understood that this is not her first, this wasn't her first time delivering news like that. And so she basically said, a lot of this you're not going to remember. You do not have to take notes right now. All of this is going to be, all this information is going to be sent to you, and it'll be available in my chart for you to go back and review. And so don't try to get all this down at that moment, which was, basically what you needed to hear, because it was a lot to try to take in and a lot to process. And so the call ended, and I just remember hanging up and just bawling my eyes out. And I remember my husband, I remember Cedric coming over there like, what? And it was just like, I just held my head down and just said, I have cancer. It's breast cancer. And so, we both had our moments. It was a very emotional time. What happened in those next few minutes is kind of a blur. I remember my sister calling, who has been down this path herself. She's a 5-year survivor, and I remember her kind of just trying to bring me to a point to realize that this moment, that moment at that time was going to be the worst moment. Receiving that news, trying to process it, just hearing those words play over and over in your head that you essentially have cancer. She was just kind of like, this is it. I know what this day feels like, and I just want you to know, this is the worst of it. After we get past today, not saying that it's going to be like a walk in the park, but anything after that moment was doable. You could receive it and you're going to be fine. But today is the worst of it, and take the time you need to get through it and know that it's going to be brighter days ahead. And in that moment, I remember thinking this can't be the worst of it. This whole process has to be horrible. But here we are, several weeks later, in terms of how I'm doing these videos right now and getting everybody caught up. Here we are several weeks later, and I can attest to what she said is true. That was absolutely the worst day ever imaginable. And I've had some horrible days, and that day doesn't compare to a lot of other things that I've experienced. But when it comes to this diagnosis specifically, that was the worst day in dealing with this diagnosis. I've had way more horrible days that I could talk about. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother channel, or I don't know, conversation later on. But in terms of, if we're talking about breast cancer diagnosis and the series of how things happen, yeah, getting the call with the pathology report results that day was definitely the worst day in terms of anything related to the cancer diagnosis thus far. Okay, so yeah, so that is the day I found out that breast cancer was found in my breast. So that was March 11th, exactly a day after the biopsy and mammogram. My next video, I plan to share, you know, just like thoughts and feelings from my husband's perspective, because, you know, what I learned early on in this process is that it's not just my diagnosis, it's not just my battle, it's not just something that I'm going through. We're all going through this together. And so I have asked him, and I think he's willing to share his perspective in terms of how, you know, how it was processing the news that day for him. I am also going to share more about what the actual pathology report stated, but in a separate video. I just wanted to kind of just come on and just more so talk about, you know, receiving the results and just kind of like how, you know, I was feeling in that moment. And so, yeah, fear, oh my goodness, fear will consume you if you let it. And so I just remember being so afraid because, you know, here I am with this beautiful family, my little girl that I, you know, have prayed so long for, my 3 wonderful boys, my amazing husband. We were also in the process of selling our house and buying another house at the time. We were doing a lot, and that was a lot to receive at that time. I'll have to talk about the whole buying a house and selling a house in another video as well. But yeah, we were doing a lot. So it was overwhelming. It was extremely overwhelming. But as you can see, I processed it. I processed it, and I did what I needed to do to move on to the next steps. And so anyone that's watching that has just found out that they have invasive ductal carcinoma or breast cancer, know that on the other side of this thing, you can get there. You can get there, and you can be in a position to where you are ready to fight and do whatever you need to do to save your life and enjoy time with your family, with your friends, this beautiful life that God has granted us. You can do that. And so, yeah, guys, so thank you for tuning in. Like, comment, share, hit the subscription button, and just stay tuned. I have so much more to talk about. And so, yeah, we're just breaking the ice, and is that what you say? You just breaking the first layer of everything. We're just getting down to the nitty-gritty. So stay tuned. Thank you, guys.